Everybody's got a story. You just have to listen. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and this is Good Listen. Today, Samantha Michelle tells her story. Now, I'm not a nightclub guy. I remember a few years ago, I walked into the club at the Bellagio in Vegas and walked out 10 minutes later because I felt 1,000 years old. But if you are a nightclub kind of person, you might know Samantha. She's an internationally known DJ that's played at the biggest music festivals, the most exclusive nightclubs, and played at parties for the most iconic brands in the world. So let's get to it and find out how it all happened for Samantha. Hey, Sam, how you doing?
I'm good. Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome, and I'm excellent. So I want to start by talking about, folks like you make things harder for people because you're so gifted that you make what you do look very easy. So I remember when I was a little kid, my brother and I had delusions of being DJs, and this was like early 90s, and I remember we bought a couple turntables, and we bought that Rob Bass song, It Takes Two, but I'm dating myself now, and we were like teenagers. This is harder than it looks. So let's talk about that skill set, because I know you kind of stumbled into it, but before we get into your journey as to how to get here, tell us about that skill, and obviously technology has changed over years, but the underrated skill of a DJ that people don't realize. Take me behind the curtain there, Samantha.
So there's a few different things. I think, what you're pointing to is the technical skill that's required to mix music well. And that, like anything, just comes with time. The great thing about DJing is that people will pay you to practice, right? Like, I have a lot of friends and mentees and people who ask me, like, how do I get into DJing? How do I build a career? And I'm like, just say yes to as many opportunities as possible and stand in the corner of as many different clubs as you can and practice mixing music through the night, And it's like, there's that old saying that if you do something for 100 hours or 1,000 hours or something, you kind of
10,000 hours. It's a 10,000 hour rule.
10,000 hours. Okay. So I've probably DJ'd for 10,000 hours over the last 10 years of my life. And, that kind of stuff adds up. It's also incredible, like, what you're able to teach yourself these days with, like, YouTube and whatnot, and just kind of taking risks, I would say, has been my biggest thing as far as, like, evolving technically and as far as practical skill. Is just like trying out new things, being prepared for things to sometimes be a little imperfect, and just kind of rolling with it. But that's the technical side of DJing. I think really what makes a great DJ is the ability to, like, read a room and engage with it generously. Because DJing, you're on a stage and you're under lights and everyone's looking at you and you're supposed to be cool and whatever. I think a lot of people come into it thinking that, like, they're there to give their performance and that people can like it or not like it or whatever. But DJing is a service job, no different than being a housekeeper or a nanny or a manicurist. I don't know. Like, you're there to provide a service to pop the party of the room that you're in. And I think the DJs that I'm always really impressed by are the ones that manage to, like, stay true to themselves and their point of view and their authenticity, whilst also understanding that, like, every room is different and they're here to serve that particular room. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. And what do you think separates, because obviously you've ridden the tide here, but what separates someone like yourself who DJs A-list parties for major brands to then, and this, I'm not disparaging like wedding DJs, but what's the difference between someone who's just like a professional DJ who's doing it like maybe side gigs, doing, random nightclubs, doing weddings, to folks like yourself that are doing these major events? Is there something, is it sort of intangible? Is there, obviously the skill set's tangible, but what do you think separates those two?
Point of view. That's something that I have, like, been sitting with recently, and something I've been working with, like, one of my mentees on is, like, somebody's giving you a stage, and what are you going to say on it? And when I say, I mean, like, nonverbal communication, right? Like, and when you think about people who have a personal brand, as they like to say, regardless of how many social media followers said person may have or not have, what they're really talking about is that person represents something. And I think that when we look at people in all facets of performance, and you can include Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift in this, right? Like, they represent something. They represent their point of view, their personality. They are who they are unapologetically. And people can get behind that, which is super different from being like, hi, I'm Bob. I will DJ your wedding. No problem. I will come with my van full of equipment. You tell me what you want and I will be that. I don't engage with that, like that with my clients. Like, I'm like, cool, I'm going to make this the best night of your life, but I'm going to do it in a way that only I can.
So I kind of hinted at the fact that this is not something that you were born ready to do. You're a multi-hyphenate, you're a filmmaker, actress, done a lot of things. And from what I understand, you sort of stumbled into this amazing career, which, happens to a lot of talented people. So can you take me back? And I think it happened in London or something like that, where you found yourself taking those baby steps to your initial hour to the 100,000 hours that you've had. So take me back to that night.
Yeah, totally. So, I growing up, I had no idea what I wanted to be. And it definitely didn't occur to me that I could build a career in like a creative space. So I kind of just fumbled my way through my late teens, early 20s, kind of trying to figure out like what was going to work for me as far as like a pursuit. And I fell in love with music when I was in college. And it just like music became my antidote to everything. And, but I never thought about making music or playing music or engaging with it in any professional way. And then one night I was at the Groucho Club. I was about 24, 25 at the time. By this point, I was very much like a nightlife girl, even though I didn't know what I wanted to do. I know I definitely found my people on dance floors. It was that way for me in college. It was definitely that way for me in London. I was pretty entrenched in a quirky scene in Soho. And there was one night at the Groucho Club, and it was their annual staff party where they asked like 10 of their favorite members to essentially like work the party for the staff. It happens every February, and they asked me to do it. And as it turns out, I was really crappy at making cocktails. And my friend who was DJing, but he was better at making cocktails, and I asked if I could like take over from the decks. And literally, I just like plugged in what was my iPod. I'm really aging myself now. And just started playing tunes. Like, I had no idea how to work CDJs or anything like that, but it wasn't a party where anybody really cared about that. It was just a bunch of people who all worked together, like having the time of their life. And I played really silly stuff. Like, I remember this night like it was yesterday. I played Aqua's Barbie Girl. This was obviously pre-Barbie being a thing.
Love it.
I played a bunch of like rockabilly, like Sam Cooke and Dion. I played Hey Jude. And there was this one moment where like everybody got like on the furniture and started singing along. And I remember just going, there's something to this. Like, look what I just made happen just because I knew to play the right thing in the right moment and get excited about it. And then from there, it really built, because for weeks afterwards, people were like, oh my God, Sam, you made the staff party. You made the staff party. Like, will you DJ this and will you DJ that? I'm like, I'm not a DJ. No, like that one thing led to another and opportunities were coming my way. And then I started to like, I connected with other DJs. I learned how to actually DJ. I started playing back to back with friends in East London. And then it kind of all evolved from there. I was doing little gigs here and there. A couple of kind of bigger industry parties landed my way. But I was still very committed to like the entertainment side and to acting. And I wasn't super interested in DJing. And then one day on a whim, this was 2016, I was chatting to a girlfriend of mine. And I was telling her about like this big money that I had made at the Toronto Film Festival doing a couple of film parties. And I'd never made that kind of money in my life. Like, and I'd used that to make my first short film, which this friend ended up acting in. And she was like, why don't we start a DJ duo together? And I said, okay. And next thing you know, like 6 months later, we're headlining Glastonbury, the Secret Garden Party, Red Rooster. We had a lot of success really quickly. I think that had a lot to do with culture and timing. This is 2016. We were two girls in their mid and late 20s who played 60s and 70s soul and rock and roll and went into spaces that were predominantly and exclusively dominated by men in their 50s and 60s who were kind of there at the time when this music was popular. And we were these two young girls with attitude in 2016, like in the wake of the Me Too, Harvey Weinstein, female empowerment kind of revolution that happened, I guess, around that time. And it just really clicked. And then that's when DJing became like, my full-time job. And I had, we had 3 or 4 residencies a week. We had a radio show. We were curating acoustic nights. We were working with all different kinds of musical talent. And I ran and rode that for about 3 years. until I decided that I wanted a change, and I had kind of, I felt like I had enough of London. I wanted to be closer to home. I'm from Toronto. My whole family still lives there. And I'd always had this kind of dream of living and working in America, which as a Canadian was just not on the cards for me. But because the smoking guns were quite an established thing in the UK and we had a lot of press and whatnot, I was able to, off the back of that, get an artist visa. And then I really started from ground zero in 2018 when I moved back to New York from London. Nobody knew who Samantha Michelle was. Nobody, it was really like starting from the bottom. But what I did have was 3 years of blood, sweat, and, whatever, fuel, tears, and all that experience behind me. And now I feel like what I'm doing is really like that, is the extension of kind of what started in winter of 2018.
Wow, that's great. That's an awesome story. And I want to pull a couple of threads there. One, let's talk about the gender disparity. You mentioned the fact that you were two young female DJs breaking through a scene that was dominated by men. And I know over the years, especially since you broke through, there's a lot more female DJs on main stages. Can you, it's probably more anecdotal, but what difference do you see from when you started now? What do you think the percentage is male, female DJ wise from where you started to where you are now?
It's hard to say because I'm never good at putting numbers around things. My brain is a little more
ballpark number. Yeah.
But I think definitely there are way more female DJs now in 2024 than there were in 2016. It's definitely not an anomaly in the same way. And certainly in terms of like the genre and the scene that we were working in the smoking guns, like that was pretty radical. Now, like I can name you 2 or 3 girls in London, New York, and LA who all will dress like they're in the 1960s and 70s and turn up with a box full of 45s and wiggle around like it's 1967 all over again. That wasn't happening everywhere 8 years ago. So I think that that's really great and really cool. That being said, the decision makers are still pretty predominantly male, like certainly in the US. One of the things that I love about working in Berlin, and I work a lot in the nightlife circles in Berlin, is there's a lot of women at the helm, right? Like gender and gender politics and sexual politics operate very differently there. And when I first started playing there about 6 months ago, like that was one of the things that really struck me, like the women at the doors, the women who are booking the DJs, like, and when you have female leadership, it's very different than when you don't have female leadership. And unfortunately, the nightlife sector, when I say nightlife, I don't mean like members clubs and parties. I mean like clubs, like lying around the block, gotta look hot to get in clubs. Like the doormen are men in America, and the people who are booking the DJs are men, and the people who own the club are men, and the people who are pouring money into the club are men. And so when you have exclusively male leadership, which is definitely, what it is like in these spaces in New York and LA, it's very different. And how do you navigate around that as a young, sexy female? Like, will always be complicated because your sexuality is part of what you bring, right? Like, and that's for every woman who walks through that door. And she knows that when she gets ready and when she gets dressed before she goes out, she knows she's got to look hot or she's not going to get in, right? Which is like not how it is in Berlin. You go to the Kit Kat Club, like there's fat people and skinny people and sexy people and men and women. And it's not like, oh, well, how many girls are in your crew? Like no one gives a shit. You can't come dressed in a suit. You got to come on vibe. You got to come on spirit. But so long as you're on spirit, it's different here. It's like the commodification of female sexuality is at the epicenter of the nightclub experience, which is all orchestrated by, for the most part, heterosexual men.
Wow. Interesting. And then another thread I want to pull from what you were talking about earlier was your skill level, because, it started with an iPod. What were you doing to make that sort of transition to becoming a serious DJ? Did you go buy a bunch of equipment? Did you go find a mentor? Like what were you doing to sort of like get that hockey curve shape kind of like trajectory to your career?
Really, I have to credit a woman. The first gig that I was offered off the back of this Groucho Club gig was this girl Natasha's birthday party. And she asked me to DJ it. And I drunkenly was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then I turn up to the party with nothing. And her friend's like, we're so grateful you're doing this. Here's a bottle of champagne. Natasha's obsessed with you. Here's Erica. She's opening for you. We can't wait. So I go over to Erica, who is a real DJ. And I'm like, she's like, I don't know. Like, how did you play at the Groucho? I was like, off my iPod. So I called the guy that I'm dating at the time and I get him to go to my apartment and get my laptop and my iPod and whatever it is I can make work. So he comes and he brings my laptop and I plugged it in and I was just playing tunes. And Erica was like, girl, these are some bangers. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't know how to touch. I don't know work any of this. And she was like, burn some CDs and come and play back to back with me at the King's Head. And I was like, okay, I could do that. And she taught me. And I'm really like, as a learner, I'm very tactile. So I'm really good at absorbing information if somebody shows me in a way where I'm like touching and pressing and doing. And so I really owe her because I, went and I played back to back side by side with her for a couple weeks. And that was like a huge, like, okay, now I know how to use CDJs and a mixer. And then like, no shame, I went and I took like the odd lesson here and there. There was a DJ equipment store in Tottenham Court Road. I can't remember what it's called, but I think I did 1 or 2 lessons there. There's a place called Rock and Soul in New York. There's a place called Scratch in New York. When I switched over from playing sticks to Serato, I went and I did a lesson or 2 with somebody at Scratch. Like I would do the odd, never went to like a DJ school as it were, but when I had something new that felt intimidating, I would just invest the $100 and, pay somebody to teach me how to do it. As far as, spending real money and equipment, like I never did that. I brought my first mixer probably 2017, 2018, but I bought just like a small all-in-one thing, which, I've now upgraded 3 or 4 times, but I've always had that. So I have something at home that I can practice on. And like still, I practice as it were at home all the time because I just think it's fun. It chills me out. I like it.
And you mentioned you have mentees now, and it sounds like it's sort of like circle of life. You had a mentor, and now you're menteeing the next generation. Is it easier now for this next generation of women trying to get through? Because now that there's more folks like you, because I've always spoken to people and they're like, it's hard for people to envision themselves in a role if they don't see someone like them in that role. And so now that there's folks like yourself and more of you, do you see more and more female DJs or what have you, gender, wanting to become DJs because they see folks like you that are taking the main stage, performing in front of thousands of people? Tell me about the future in that respect.
Yeah, 100%. Like I joke that I'm like this DJ grandma because during the pandemic, I taught my 2 best friends how to DJ and they formed a DJ duo. They've now gone on and had crazy, unbelievable, super well-deserved success. I couldn't be more thrilled and more proud for them. And in and amongst their community, they're very entrenched in New York nightlife and doing lots of residencies and kind of like what I was doing back in London in 2016, 2017 when I started to build. And so they've now got like a whole little coterie of young people in their early mid-20s who kind of follow around what they do. And now a couple of those people have gone and learned how to DJ. So I joke that I'm like the 3rd generation kind of, above everyone. I think it's such a beautiful thing because people see and they're like, oh, I want to do that. I could go do that. And could I maybe go do that? And my answer is, and the answer to, the boys that I taught is like, yeah, of course you can. And we're here to help you. And we're here to be a resource for you. And we're here to show you the way. And I think it's so important to pay it forward. And I think it's so important, especially in the DJ industry, which has just so much douchebaggery and so much ego and so much, I think I am God, let me come all over your decks. Like, to just be about something different in that space and be about, mentorship and community and collaboration and abundance mindset and all of the values that I really, believe in. And if I'm going to bring 100 or 200 or 300 or 400 or how many people into a room together, or if I'm going to program a stage, like it's going to be about something, which comes back to the original point about have a point of view, have a perspective, like represent something. The world does not need more DJs, but the world needs your voice. Like, and the world will always need voices, but it doesn't need abstract ideas of something.
That's so cool. And I know there's a cliche and stereotype that women don't work well together. They're very catty. They're, I know it's very cliche, but there's sometimes, I think Martin Scorsese once said that like the thing about cliches is there's a bit of truth in them. Did you ever experience that, or were you fortunate enough to have great experiences working alongside women?
No, I did not experience that. I mean, like I've had some amazing women in my life who have been incredible champions, like Erica, like my old DJ partner, Reina, like there's been incredible women in my life, but there's also been like, I can't even tell you the amount of times that I have just felt so shut down by other women. There was one really, this was like a whoa turning point. Katie, actually, our mutual friend, this was 2018, 2019. She recommended I go to South by Southwest and I sign up for a bunch of these mentor-mentee kind of roundtable session things where you basically, like, for free or for the cost of your badge or whatever, you get to sign up to have 5 minutes with these different producers, agents, whatever characters in the film space who ideally have wisdom to impart to you, young aspiring filmmaker. So I was like, okay, great, sure, why not? Once I sign up, once I'm doing this, let me sign up for a whole bunch. And I signed up for, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like a bunch of these mentee sessions. And they were about split between men and women. And, they were all really interesting. And, everyone gave me their details or whatever. And I basically followed up with everybody that there was a reason to follow up with. And across the board of my follow-up, every single man that I wrote to responded to me and not a single woman did.
Wow.
Not a single woman. When I think like right now about who I'm rounding together for my Lovin' in LA tomorrow, like a lot of the contacts that I have in LA here are in the entertainment industry and they are exclusively men. Again, this was 5, 6 years ago, this South by Southwest experience. I'm sure things have evolved since, but like definitely my experience of navigating the creative industry spaces was one in which I knew that like I could get men to champion me because I could be sweet and flirty and pretty. And I knew that other women were going to see me as a threat in a competition and it would be an uphill battle. And that's what my experience was for the most part, which is why I do what I do now, which is why I curate these nights where it's all lady power, all female leadership, all female DJs. Most of my mentees are girls, like I really go out of my way to just put something different into the world because it's one thing to sit back and go, I don't like that. And it's quite another to sit back and go, I don't like that. Cool. Let's roll up our sleeves and offer an alternative and then watch that ripple out. And I've been watching it ripple in the last 6 months since I've been, producing my own parties and building out this sort of Samantha Michelle experiences. Like it's just so incredible because women don't have to be like that with each other. I understand where it comes from. I've thought a lot about this. Like, I think it's primordial. Like, if you look back to pre-agricultural revolution and us as a human species traveling around hunting the buffalo or whatever it might be, like, there weren't family units in the way that there were now. And one man could impregnate any number of women at one point in time. So if me and 3 other chicks are all pregnant with the same man's babies or have the same man's babies, and our man is going out to get his leg of the buffalo and he comes back with his buffalo thigh on his shoulder, then all of a sudden all these other girls pregnant with this, guy's offsprings all want a little bit of that buffalo thigh as well. And I need that buffalo thigh to like feed my children. So now all of a sudden these women are a direct threat to my survival and the survival of my offspring, which is physiologically the thing I'm here on this earth to protect. So embedded in the DNA of womankind, according to this DJ who has very little like social anthropology knowledge, but my theory is that's really where it all comes from. And then when you figure post-agricultural revolution, the fact that men have been dominating industry and cultural narrative forever, it like serves and bolsters the patriarchy and the male ego to have women at odds with each other, competing for the thing which we are told to believe is the holy grail, which is male attention.
And the great thing about it is what you're doing is not only you are serving an example for women who want to be DJs, but also how to do it right in terms of like, hey, let's help the next generation. Let's help our sister that's next to us. So it's really cool that you've really focused on that. And it seems like that was pretty intentional. You're like, I seen how people have been assholes to me. I don't want to do that to somebody else. Or do you think it was unintentional the way you've approached, being a mentor and assisting other women in the business?
I think my personality is like I'm a wrong writer, like when I coming out of school, I remember I really wanted to be a teacher because I had such issues with my teachers. Like, and I was like, okay, I know I'm going to go and be a teacher and I'm not going to be like that. And therefore, obviously I didn't go and become a teacher, but what I take the attitude to everything that I do. If I see like a status quo that I don't like and that I don't agree with, it puts a fire under my butt to like bulldoze into the space and offer an alternative, So I think that that's what's happening a little bit. But truthfully, the idea for SM Presents like came from one of my friends, like one of my best friends that I was talking about the other day, that's half of this male DJ duo. There was one night in the summer, we were at Paul's Baby Grand, and actually a third generation DJ girl who they had taught and sort of mentored was playing. And my friend says to me, why don't you produce your own events? And I was like, no, I have no interest in doing that. Last thing I want to do is be like rounding up people to come to a party. That sounds like a pain in the ass. Nope, not interested. And he was like, you could make it where it's like your thing to book only women. And I was like, say that again? That sounds cool. And then he was like, and why don't you reach out to Soho House? Because obviously Soho House, programs for their members. So whilst I'm allowed to bring a DJ guest list, like there's certainly, I can't sell tickets. It's not like programming a club that's open to the public. And I said, oh, that's a good idea. And I'd been working with Soho House since the beginning. Like my first ever gig that I was booked for was at Soho House in London. So I pitched them on the idea. And as it happens, that next night, there's another guy who books events who's, a male DJ in the space who works with a lot of men. And he was doing an event at Soho House that night. So I kind of just in my pitch to them said, listen, I know that this is, an avenue that you have going, and like, that's cool and that's groovy and he's great. And we've worked together, no disrespect, but like, wouldn't it be cool for like Soho House to get behind an experience that's like vividly, not just femme forward, but like fun, like silly, fun, light, like let's not take it all too seriously. And they were like, yeah, great, let's do it. So it started with Capri Ski, which was this like Italian disco themed thing. I think I was just about to go to Italy. And that was so fun and I loved it. And their, membership got really excited about it. And that night they said to me, we really want you to do, something in October. And the idea of Witches of Disco just like came to me like that. And I was like, let's do Witches of Disco, like Halloween vibe. And they loved it. And then I was in Berlin and they loved that concept. So we did Witches of Disco in Berlin. And then October, I played the Halloween, the big party here at Soho LA. And one of the managers took a liking to my music. And then she found out what I was doing kind of beyond just performing myself. And they asked me to bring Witches of Disco to LA. And so I had a meeting with their team. And at the end of the meeting, the lady I was meeting with said, actually, we have this idea. We kind of want to do something for Valentine's Day, but we don't want it to be hokey. Do you have any ideas? And the war in Israel, everything was so on my mind. I was just like, let's do a love it, like in the vibe of the anti-war movement. Like, let's come and bring it together and sit in and love in and just have a big love party. And they were like, okay, great. So that got on the diary. And then I was like, let's do it bi-coastally. And then, I brought it to New York. They were really excited about it. And that's how this kind of like bi-coastal lovin' became. So it's been a really kind of organic and very intuitive. Like I literally just made up all three of these concepts like on the spot.
That's so cool. So you're balancing SM Presents is sort of like basically a production company that goes to places, but you're DJ for hire and have worked, and you joked earlier about how people are brands, but you've worked for some major brands like basically any A-lister you could think of, Versace, Louis Vuitton, any one of those. When it comes to dealing with brands like that, and actually, you're elevating your brand when they call it authority by association. You elevate your brand when you work with folks like that. Is it any different when you work with someone with the, with the glow about them or the persona around them, like whether it's a Dolce Gabbana or somebody like that? Do you have to program yourself differently, or is it to use like I'm just you kind of alluded to it, like I bring myself to the party, but tell me about when it comes to dealing with these really like ultra A-list brands.
Well, I think when it comes to working with brands, I always like to, everything that I do is very tailor-made. So the sound that I'm going to bring to Dolce & Gabbana is going to be very different from the sound that I'm going to bring to Wall Street Journal, which is going to be very different to the sound that I'm going to bring to AI House the next night. Like it's very different. Like, and I always like to sort of think of it as I'm bringing myself, but stepping into the shape of the brand, right? And it's this kind of marriage between the two. And I've been so blessed with both, Dolce & Gabbana and Wall Street Journal, who I've worked with in 3 or 4 different cities, across 4 or 5 different gigs, across multiple years, And I think that the reason why I've been kind of, brought back time and time again is because I come in with that attitude of like, I'm here to serve. Like, I know what Dolce & Gabbana is about. And like, I've loved Dolce & Gabbana since I was a kid. So when I got the opportunity to work with them, and when they said to me like, we feel like you're very on brand for us and we love your vibe and your energy and you're so Dolce, I was like, 18-year-old me just can't even believe I'm hearing these things. But the truth is I am so Dolce. Like I love leopard print. I am a little bit naughty. I am bold. I am like, all the things that brands are. It's so hard to put it into words, right?
Yeah.
Like it's vibe, it's energy, it's attitude, it's style, it's whatever. And there's a part of me that's very Dolce, but then there's another part of me that can totally clean up and button up, but still like keep on a sequin bikini or whatever, which Wall Street Journal gives me the space to do. But it's different. Like the music that I'm going to play is going to be informed by what I know fits for that brand and fits for their audience and that particular event, and whether or not it has a theme or if it's an 11 o'clock situation versus a 6 o'clock situation, et cetera, et cetera.
All right. So one thing I like to do every once in a while is I like to ask the sliding door question. And I think you're the perfect example of it. So, and we've joked about that iPod of yours. Have you ever thought about what your life would be like if you never plugged in that iPod at that party? I mean, do you envision a world where that never happened? Because the track that you're on now probably would not have taken place. Who knows? It could have, but more likely not. Do you think about what would happen if you didn't sort of, as we mentioned, stumble into being a DJ, what your life would be like today?
I do. I often think about that. I often think about what my life would be like if I had stayed in New York, as opposed to moving to London and spending most of my 20s there. Like, it wasn't an option for me at the time. Like I said, I didn't have a visa or whatever. But I often think about that. I often think about what my life would be like if I didn't spend 3 years being one half of the Smoking Guns. That was a huge thing, to spend 3 years of your life in a partnership like that. And I haven't thought about if I hadn't plugged in my iPod until you asked this question. But truthfully, I think had I not, I genuinely don't think I would have ever become a DJ.
And speaking, last thing about that iPod, do you still have it? You should make like a necklace out of it. Like make like a Flavor Flav type necklace to symbolize how far you've come.
Well, what's funny is, speaking of all of this, so actually next week I'm going back to my old high school in Toronto, and I'm doing a talk on like how to pursue a career in the arts, which is going to be unbelievable because this is like a Jewish high school and they've never had anybody creative come and speak, like, ever. I also had a really, really, really hard time there, like personally. Just, I was an outsider. I was a misfit. I didn't fit. And this was a very cliquey, bubbly sort of situation. So I am so humbled and grateful. I can't believe that they've invited me to do this. And crazily, the way that it's been said is now I'm speaking to 4 different grade 11 media classes. And I was talking last week with the alumni coordinator who sort of put this all together. And I said, you know what? I think I have my grade 11 media project. And I think it's in storage in LA. And when I got here last night, dun, 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 dun.
Wow.
This is from 2007. And this is like our grade 11 media project was to make a magazine. And obviously I loved shoes, Louboutin specifically. Again, this is 2007. If you would have told me in grade 11 that I would go on to DJ for Christian Louboutin in the Hamptons, I would have never believed it. Ever. The back of it is a makeshift advertisement for this vintage store in Toronto. I went on to have my own vintage store when I was 25. That's what precipitated all of the filmmaking and storytelling and experience creating. This whole thing is all about shoes. So I look at the brain of 16-year-old me, Louboutin for spring 2007, and I'm like, this is what I was interested in. I just didn't really know because I had no skills, no models, no role models, no mentors, nobody to show me or the way that like how I could engage with all of the things that I was interested in. But now I look back on this from where I am now and it's like crazy.
And in high school, you said you were a misfit. What's a message for a misfit listening to this right now? Whether they're 16, 60 years old and they feel like out of place, they don't feel like they belong to this world. What do you say to someone like that?
That feeling you have of not belonging or being weird or being on the outside, whatever it is that causes you to feel that way is your pot of gold. It's your magic pot. You got to set up camp inside there and understand that that is the place from which you can excavate, making your wildest dreams come true. And then when you enter into the spaces that I work in now, where people get to do their wildest dreams, like travel all over the world and make parties fun, the great secret is every single person in that space like was a misfit also. And whether it's like the music space or the entertainment space, whether you're talking about actors, writers, directors, any storyteller, any performer, anybody who's going, watch me, hear me, see my soul. They didn't fit in high school either. They were a weirdo too, which is why they have that calling. So, and all of the kids who did fit in, who were like the quarterback of the football team or the, I don't know, like the prom queen, we didn't have that at the Jewish high school, but like, but we had the equivalent of the cool popular girl. And you know what all of the cool popular girls are doing now? They are married with children and chances are like not that happy. And again, nothing against being married with children. I'd like that one day for myself. But like people who peak in high school, like they peak in high school. People who have struggles when they're young have to learn how to grin and bear that. And that experience, that reckoning is what fortifies a strength of self and like a courage of like voice. And without that, you have no space. There's no room for you in these very competitive performance, storytelling, point of view, elevating industries.
That's great stuff. Her name is Samantha Michelle. Miss Samantha, it's great catching up with you. Thank you for telling your story. I feel like the anti-you, like you've been to more cities in the last week than I've been in like my life. So I'm kind of feeling a little FOMO on that, but you're living your best life. And I feel like you did the right thing. You know, plugging in that iPod worked out for you really well.
I think so. And, you know, now the question is like, where do we go from here? Right? Because now I got it all. I even got my green card off the back of being a DJ after 15 years of not being able to like live and work in this country, you know? So now it's like, I feel like, where do I go from here? How do I amplify this message? How do I make sure that what I'm like giving my life and daily hours to really matters and really touches people and makes the world better? Because I think that's what we need right now.
Awesome. Can't wait to see you. Samantha, thanks again for the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. I'll talk to you soon.
Absolutely. And that's today's Good Listen. I'm Joe Pardavila. You can always connect with me on X, LinkedIn, and Instagram at Joe Pardavila or TikTok at J Pardavila. If you want to reach out, feel free to shoot me an email at joepardavila@protonmail.com and tell me your story. Lastly, it would be awesome if you would leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify and hit subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.